Kitril Consultancy presents Communication Tips for Avoiding Unhealthy Conflict. This presentation is in collaboration with the Black Women for Positive Change as we celebrate their 12th Annual Month of Nonviolence, Families, Voting Rights, and Opportunities. Hello and welcome. When it comes to communication, we have what's called sending or feeding information and messages, and we have what's called receiving and eating information and messages. What we want to do here in this short presentation is give you tips on how you can communicate effectively without causing unhealthy conflict. Tip number 1, strive to have conversations as opposed to confrontations. It's funny how some people like to have verbal sparring matches and they like to throw verbal jabs and they love to just have confrontations with people. They brawl with their words and communication. Well, when you take this approach, you're going to always have unhealthy conflict. There's always going to be problems that arise and there will be differences that won't be settled if you take this approach. This is something you want to try to minimize and if at all, eliminate so that you won't have a lot of confrontations when it comes to communication. Tip number 2, use lots of commendation, give correction when necessary, and avoid condemnation when addressing others. You want to do more commending, encouraging, and building people up, as well as edifying them. Make them feel good about themselves. Now, when a person is wrong, it's fine to correct them. But as I always teach, it's all about correcting with facts and truth and information and not just with your opinion. If it is a fact, then it can be proven, it can be validated, and we can show you where a person is wrong. But if it's just your opinion, that's all it is. And you don't want to correct people with your opinion. And last but not least, you don't want to condemn people. You want to always give grace and hope when you communicate, even if things are going in the wrong direction. You always want people to know that there is a possibility that things can be corrected. They can come back from a fall or from failure, and that life is not over just because of their mistakes and things that they may do wrong. And so we have to make sure to institute this when we're communicating. Tip number 3, monitor your tone when engaging in discussions. I know you've heard the phrase, "It's not what you say, but how you say it." And when you think about it, in most cases, those words or the energy behind the words is what causes unhealthy conflict. When your tone is high, when your tone is aggressive, when your tone is angry, then by default, the other person is going to assume a defensive posture. So if you come and you have a mild tone, you have a mellow tone, then in most cases, people are going to at least listen to you and hear you out. Even if they disagree with what you're saying, if your tone is correct, then they'll be willing to give you the time of day and pay attention and kind of hear what you have to say. Tip number 4, communicate with empathy. One concept I am very familiar with is empathy. And what we always teach people as a parent educator, it just simply means to put yourself in the shoes of others and to see things from their perspective and to feel how they're feeling. When you communicate, you want to take on this attribute. In other words, what the things that I'm saying to this individual, what I want someone to tell these things to me. This tone that I have, what I want someone to have this tone with me. And if you communicate like this, you're going to be very effective and you will be able to avoid lots of unhealthy conflict if you institute empathy in your communication. Tip number 5, listen with an open mind and without judgment. Out of all of the communication tips, this one is one of the most challenging because it's hard to just listen with an open mind and without judgment. If someone is communicating and talking, we're typically going through our minds saying, boy, I can't wait until he or she stops. I'm going to say this, I'm going to respond in this way, I'm going to offer this rebuttal. Instead of just listening, keeping our thoughts to ourselves, kind of silencing that inner voice and just clearly hearing what the person is trying to articulate and the message they're trying to convey. If we can listen like this, I promise you it will definitely help us to avoid unhealthy conflict. If we could just put our judgment down, just open our minds, even if we disagree. Tip number 6, avoid interrupting others when they are speaking. Having the restraint and discipline to not butt in while someone is talking is very critical. I know lots of people who it's very hard for them to just sit still and to be quiet while someone else is speaking. But it takes restraint, it takes self-control. And if you want to avoid unhealthy conflict, this is an ingredient that you'll have to institute while you're communicating. You just have to sit there and listen. If you want to, hey, nod your head, shake your head, give a thumbs up, give a smile or whatever, but try your best not to interrupt the person, because when you interrupt the individual, it interrupts their train of thought. It gets them off track sometimes. In most cases, they're going to get kind of irritated. So you don't want to do that, because it's definitely going to spark unhealthy conflict if you constantly butt in and interrupt while others are speaking. Tip number 7, hear with your ear and hear with your heart. This is the final tip, and to me is one of the most important ones, because it's really all about hearing and listening. And when you hear with your ear, you're listening for the content, for the information, what the person is saying. But when you hear with your heart, you're listening to the person's feeling, the energy behind what they're saying, the motivation behind it. And in order to be an effective listener, you have to master these two concepts of hearing content accurately and correctly, but then also hearing feelings and emotions accurately. And when you're able to combine those two, you will definitely avoid unhealthy conflict when you communicate. Thanks for watching. If you or your organization would like to receive coaching or consulting in the area of communication, please reach out to us at kitrilconsult.com.